During my childhood in the late 90s and early 2000s, I had a deep affinity for nature and spent much of my time outdoors. Whether it was observing bugs, frogs, or lizards, I found joy in the little creatures that inhabited our world. Being the sibling of an enthusiastic sports player, I often found myself accompanying my mom to my brother's soccer practices and games, even if it meant sacrificing my own explorations. On this particular day, it was soccer season, and I had to tag along with my mom to my brother's practice after school. The practice took place at a local park that boasted not only soccer fields but also some surrounding wilderness and hiking trails. What intrigued me about this park was a creek tucked away beside the soccer fields. This creek was teeming with frogs, and I couldn't resist the allure of observing and attempting to catch them. As the evening approached and the sun began to set, there was still plenty of daylight remaining. Seizing the opportunity, I mustered up the courage to ask my mom if I could venture down to the creek to search for frogs. She agreed, and with excitement in my heart, I scurried down the hill, hidden by bushes and shrubs, towards the creek. A well-defined dirt trail accompanied the water's edge, guiding my steps. Engrossed in my search for frogs, I was suddenly startled by a man's voice intruding upon my solitude. Startled, I glanced up to find a middle-aged man standing on the trail, blocking my path back up to the soccer field. Dressed in typical office attire, button-up shirt, slacks, and dress shoes, he looked at me with a friendly smile. As a shy and cautious child, I initially remained silent, my instincts warning me of potential danger. This man's appearance and outfit did not align with the typical hikers I encountered along the trail. Curiously, he asked, "What are you looking for?" I continued to observe him silently, weighing my response. I felt an uneasy tension growing within me, sensing that something was amiss. Despite occasionally encountering hikers on the trail near the creek, this man's demeanor set off alarm bells in my young mind. Undeterred, he continued, "Are you searching for butterflies? I saw some down there," gesturing further down the trail, away from the soccer fields. With caution, I replied, "No," while assessing my surroundings, desperately seeking an escape route. The need to remove myself from the situation surged within me, but he stood directly on the trail, obstructing my path back to the fields. Thick bushes lined the hillside, separating the trail from the fields. Determined to extricate myself from his presence, I began ascending the rocks adjacent to the creek, heading towards the trail but farther down from where he stood. To my dismay, I noticed him moving closer, descending the trail in my direction, his voice accompanying his approach. "Do you need any help?" Panic began to overtake me, even though nothing explicitly threatening had transpired. Nevertheless, an overwhelming sense of danger pervaded my thoughts. I felt a sudden surge of adrenaline and fear coursing through my veins. Reacting instinctively, I shouted, "No," and hastily scrambled up the rocks, crossed the trail, and crashed my way through the dense bushes, pushing towards the soccer field. The branches scraped against my skin, but my focus remained fixated on reaching the safety of the fields. Sprinting towards where my mom watched my brother's practice, I must have appeared disheveled and distressed, prompting her immediate concern. Naturally, she inquired about what had transpired, and I recounted the unsettling encounter. Despite sharing my experience, I felt as though I shared my experience with my mom, I couldn't shake the feeling that she thought I was being overly paranoid. Her response didn't quite match the intensity of fear that had gripped me during the encounter. Nevertheless, I felt relieved to have made it back to the soccer fields unharmed. Reflecting on the incident later that evening, a whirlwind of thoughts raced through my mind. I couldn't help but wonder if the man truly posed a threat or if I had simply misjudged him. Perhaps he was merely a passerby seeking some fresh air on his way home from work, and my young imagination had spun a web of unnecessary fear. Regardless, the encounter had left me feeling uneasy. Days turned into weeks, and the memory gradually faded into the recesses of my mind. Life resumed its usual rhythm, and I immersed myself in school, hobbies, and the company of friends. Yet, a part of me remained cautious, hyper-aware of the potential dangers lurking in unexpected places. I became more attuned to my surroundings, trusting my instincts and intuition to keep me safe. Years passed, and as I grew older, I found solace in sharing my story with others who had faced similar situations. We discussed the importance of personal safety, the significance of trusting our instinct, and the need to be cautious without succumbing to unnecessary fear. Through these conversations, I realized that my experience was not isolated. Many others had encountered unsettling situations and had navigated through them with varying degrees of success. Though I would never know for certain what the man's intentions were that day at the creek, I realized that my intuition had served me well. It had guided me to swiftly remove myself from a potentially dangerous situation. That encounter became a valuable lesson, ingraining in me the importance of listening to my gut instincts and remaining vigilant in unfamiliar circumstances. As time passed, I continued to explore the wonders of nature, developing a deep appreciation for its beauty and resilience. I still marveled at bugs, frogs, and lizards, but now with a heightened sense of caution. The incident at the creek had instilled in me an unwavering commitment to personal safety, empowering me to embrace the world around me while also remaining mindful of potential risks. Looking back, I realized that my response that day was not simply fueled by paranoia, but by a genuine understanding that our instincts serve as powerful tools for self-preservation. While I may never encounter that particular man again or fully comprehend his intentions, I carry the memory of that encounter as a reminder to trust myself, be cautious, and prioritize my well-being in all situations. And so, I continue to navigate life, cherishing the joys of exploration and embracing the world with a sense of curiosity and awareness. I spent my childhood living at the summit of a mountain, a place that had been mostly abandoned since an old ski lodge burned down in the 1960s. Only 2 other families resided at the top with us, while the rest of the houses stood empty or had been abandoned. The mountain itself had a long history that dated back hundreds of years, even before Canada was colonized. Legend had it that 2 Native American communities, one residing on top of the mountain and the other in the valley below, were once at war. The valley tribe deceitfully ambushed the mountain tribe on their way down for battle, slaughtering their women and children. When the mountain tribe returned, they too were massacred. It is said that the vines of wild strawberries that covered the entire mountainside grew from the spilled blood of the mountain tribe. Death seemed to linger on this mountain. During my upbringing, I encountered numerous old crosses scattered along the winding paths. Tragically, my own father would later become one of those crosses. Within a small meadow, enclosed by trees, stood a quaint cottage accessible only through an overgrown pathway. No driveways in sight. If you peered through the windows, you'd find breakfast left untouched for years, oatmeal and eggs growing cold. Rumor had it that the inhabitant of that cottage was a fugitive who vanished deeper into the mountains when the police came searching for him. Our neighbors were an eccentric bunch. They would visit every other weekend from the city, bringing their daughter who happened to be the same age as me. They would indulge in drugs, alcohol, and even engage in naked orgies in their yard or the surrounding forest. An eerie atmosphere shrouded the mountain, aptly named Forbidden. Standing by my bedroom window at night, I could swear I saw movement in the forest below, sending chills down my spine. The mountain boasted the highest concentration of mountain lions in the world, and I frequently felt their presence as I walked home. One night, my mother was awakened by the sound of the sliding door opening and closing. She ventured downstairs to find my sister sleepwalking, whispering "Here, kitty, kitty" repeatedly. Sleepwalking was a new phenomenon for her. Hastily, my mother secured the door, only to discover a cougar pacing back and forth on the deck when she flicked on the lights. In addition to my sister's sleepwalking, my father also developed a troubling habit of violent sleepwalking during our time on the mount. He would engage in shouting matches with an invisible adversary, sometimes even throwing objects around. a behavior he had never exhibited until the final years of his life. Despite his sleepwalking episodes, my father was a skilled driver who had traversed the treacherous roads up the mountain and other narrow logging roads in the area countless times. However, a few months prior to the accident that changed everything, I began having waking nightmares of my father's death. A premonition kept telling me he would die. I frequently woke up in the middle of the night, peering out the window into the forest, feeling as though something was communicating this impending tragedy to me. One evening, my father kissed me goodnight and set off to town with his friends. They departed in separate vehicles, with my father leading the way. According to the accounts of what transpired, it was a freak accident. They were driving below the speed limit on a straight stretch of road approaching a cliffside corner when my father's truck suddenly lost traction, skidding sideways toward the cliff's edge. In a split second, my father opened the truck door and jumped out. Miraculously, the truck veered in the opposite direction, flipping onto him as he lay on the ground. It was an inexplicable turn of events, defying all physical laws. The weight of the truck crushed nearly every bone in my father's body, leaving him clinging to life. He was airlifted to the hospital, where he fought for 8 agonizing days before succumbing to his injuries. On the day he passed away, I sensed it before anyone told me. There was an overwhelming feeling, an indescribable certainty that something was communicating his death to me. I collapsed onto the ground, screaming in anguish, "He's dead, isn't he? He's dead, isn't he?" I was just 8 years old, and this was my first encounter with the finality of death. Countless other unsettling events unfolded on that mountain throughout the years, affecting different individuals. Locally, it had gained a reputation as a haunted and peculiar place. Nothing positive ever seemed to occur there. People would behave strangely, commit heinous acts, lose their minds, or meet untimely death. When I was 9, we made the decision to leave. The feeling of something insidious surrounding us disappeared as we moved away. I never encountered that sensation again in any other place. I returned to the mountain a few times in my life, and without fail, that unsettling feeling would resurface, a reminder of the darkness that permeated its very core. The mountain held its secrets, with stories of the past lingering in whispers among the trees. The tragic history of the warring tribes, the abandoned crosses dotting the landscape, the mysterious fugitive hiding in the cottage, the eccentric neighbors and their provocative gatherings, the lurking mountain lions, my family's unsettling sleepwalking episodes, and above all, the foreboding premonitions leading to my father's inexplicable demise. It all contributed to the aura of enigma and sorrow that cloaked the mountain. Some places carry a weight, an intangible energy that defies logical explanation. They become imprinted with the memories and emotions of those who have lived there, leaving an indelible mark on the landscape. The mountain, with its dark history and peculiar occurrences, left an enduring impact on my life, forever etched in my memory. And while I've moved on to new surroundings, that haunting feeling of something insidious lingers, a reminder of the extraordinary and eerie experiences that shaped my early years atop that forbidding mountain. To provide some context, I want to mention that I have always had a belief in the paranormal. My own experiences, as well as those of my mother and grandmother, have solidified this belief. The incident I'm about to describe was not particularly scary, but rather strange and unexplainable. At the time, I worked as a manager at a well-known drugstore and took a backroad route to and from work every day for a span of 2 years. This road was situated in a semi-rural area that had once been vast farmland, but was now gradually being sold off to developers. This background information will help you understand the setting of the story. To give you further insight into the area, my ex-in-laws had lived nearby for 30 years on a 200-acre property where they ran a cattle farm. Even after they downsized and moved to a smaller farm, the area remained familiar to us. This was a region known for its extensive mining activities and the occurrence of strange phenomena. Additionally, there was a large landfill located nearby. It was a typical day when I was heading home, feeling relatively alert and not particularly tired. As I was driving along the back road, which was lined by cornfields, I noticed something unusual. There, on the edge of the fields, stood a house that I had never seen before. It was a modest, unassuming red house with a peaked roof and a porch in the front. However, my initial thought wasn't about the novelty of the house's appearance. Instead, I found myself pondering how the residents accessed their home. I couldn't spot any driveways leading to the house, which struck me as odd considering it was 2015 and every house should have a driveway. I continued along the road, rounding another bend, and soon the house disappeared from my view. I started observing the neighboring houses, hoping to find evidence of driveways that connected to the mysterious house, but I couldn't find any. At that point, I approached a well-traveled intersection that also featured a large church. I remained alert and kept on driving, although the memory of the strange house stayed with me. Later that evening, when I was discussing my day with my ex-partner, I mentioned the peculiar house and how it had felt eerie. I couldn't comprehend how I had never noticed it before, given the countless times I had driven along that road. The next day, on my way back from work, I paid close attention to the area where I had seen the house. However, to my surprise, it was nowhere to be found. It had vanished without a trace. I still vividly remember the image of that house in my mind, even though its physical existence remains a mystery. To this day, I cannot fully explain what I witnessed on that fateful day. The memory of that small, red house with its elusive entrance continues to puzzle me. It's a true story, but it's been challenging for me to talk about because people often dismiss it as a joke. Recently, I came across an article about a woman who encountered an invisible creature resembling the predator from the movie. While I don't entirely believe the picture she shared, it reminded me of my own encounter and sparked my curiosity about others who might have come across a similar being in the woods. Here's what happened to me. I was around 5 years old, playing near the woods behind my grandmother's house. She would keep an eye on me from the kitchen or living room, as the house had large windows facing the woods. I loved digging in the dirt and collecting rocks and arrowheads, which were quite common in the area. This happened in Midwest Illinois, not too far from Cahokia Mounds. On that particular day, I had found a spot to dig and had been at it for a while. While engrossed in my activity, something caught my attention on a tree branch nearby. It's hard to describe, but it looked like a heat wave shimmering off the branch. Since it was fall, I remember wearing my pink jacket and thinking how angry my mom would be if I got dirt on it. The ground was covered in leaves. As I focused on this strange phenomenon, I realized it had a human shape. A mixture of fear and confusion enveloped me as I wondered why there was an invisible man in the tree. Unsure of what to do, I decided that this was something I shouldn't be witnessing and quickly ran back to the house. My grandmother noticed that I was visibly shaken, and I told her that I had just seen an angel. At that age, I hadn't heard of aliens, ghosts, or monsters, so an angel was the only explanation my young mind could grasp. Fast forward to when I was around 12 years old, and the memory of that encounter had faded. I enjoyed watching action and sci-fi movies, and one day my dad rented the movie Predator. As I watched the film with him, the first time the Predator appeared invisible, cloaked, I was terrified. All the memories from my childhood experience came rushing back. I even asked my dad if the Predator was real or if any animals possessed the ability to cloak themselves. He assured me it was all fictional. Without easy access to the internet at the time, I had no way to explore it further, so I simply put it out of my mind. Years passed, and it was around 2004. I was now a grown woman with 3 young children. Recently separated from my husband, I had moved to a new town and rented an apartment for myself and the kids. The apartments were single-level duplexes, located on the outskirts with a deep ditch running behind them, separated by a chain-link fence. A small forest lay beyond the ditch, eventually leading to farmland. My apartment was at the very end of the last building, providing a secluded environment. One night, I was up late doing laundry and decided to take a smoke break on the back porch. It was dark outside, and I could faintly hear a clicking sound. Assuming it was a groundhog I had seen in the yard a few days earlier, I glanced toward the ditch. The yard was dimly lit by an outside light near the playground, located to the right of my porch. Not seeing any movement, I returned to smoking my cigarette, but the clicking sound persisted, and a slight movement caught my attention. I looked up toward the tree on the left side of my porch, and there it was again, the same invisible presence I had encountered when I was 5. It appeared as a distorted humanoid shape, crouched on a branch with its arm gripping the trunk. Disbelief washed over me, and fear set in as I wondered if this creature had come to harm me for having seen it all those years ago. My immediate concern was for the safety of my children, sleeping peacefully inside the apartment. I rushed inside, slamming and locking the door behind me. Frantically, I checked all the windows in my kids' rooms, ensuring they were securely locked. Feeling a mix of panic and adrenaline, I turned off the lights in the living room and positioned myself by the blinds, peering out into the night, hoping to catch another glimpse of the creature. For a tense 10 minutes, I remained there, straining my eyes, but there was no sign of it. Gradually, I started convincing myself that it was merely exhaustion playing tricks on my mind. Just as I began to calm down, a neighbor's dog came charging across the yard, barking furiously at the exact branch where I had seen the predator. This was unusual because the dog was typically quiet and had never barked at anything before, not even the groundhog. The barking persisted for a few minutes until the neighbor called the dog back inside. Reluctantly, the dog retreated, frequently glancing back at the branch before disappearing from sight. I spent that night wide awake, haunted by the experience. I never witnessed anything like it again. Now, as a grown woman with a stable career and a family to care for, I find myself desperate to find others who may have had similar encounters. I know what I saw was real, whether people believe me or not. I'm sharing my story here, hoping to connect with others who can provide insights or perhaps share their own encounters with these invisible beings. Thank you for taking the time to read my account, and I sincerely appreciate any responses or support.